The Sylphian High Council vessel emerged from hyperspace with all the grace their species was known for, its crystalline hull catching starlight like morning dew. Ambassador Thela stood at the command deck, her iridescent scales shifting colors with anticipation. This was supposed to be a routine first contact with yet another emerging spacefaring species, humans, they called themselves. The reports had labeled them as peculiar but peaceful, which in diplomatic speak usually meant harmlessly primitive. Ambassador, we're receiving a transmission from the human diplomatic station, announced Navigation Officer Real, his antenna twitching in confusion. They're inviting us to something called a potluck dinner. Thela's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. In their 1,000 years of diplomatic missions, no species had ever initiated first contact with a meal invitation. Are you certain this isn't a translation error? The message is quite clear, Ambassador. They've attached recipes and dietary preference forms. Real's scales shifted to a puzzled blue. They want to know if we have any allergies. The Sylphian delegation spent the next several hours in heated debate. Some argued it was a trap, others insisted it was simply a cultural misunderstanding. First contact specialist Nira suggested they consult the galactic archives about human customs, only to discover that humans had already hosted similar diplomatic dinners with 3 other species. They fed the carnivorous Deltarians. Thela examined the records in disbelief. And the silicon-based Petrovi? How is that even possible? According to these records, Nira's fingers danced across the holographic interface. Humans are what they call innovative cooks. They apparently pride themselves on adapting their culinary techniques to any species. Meanwhile, at the human diplomatic station orbiting Europa, Chief Diplomatic Chef Marcus Singh was reviewing the Sylphian biological data with his team. The kitchen, a marvel of human engineering, hummed with activity as specialized food synthesizers and traditional cooking equipment worked in harmony. Their digestive system is fascinating, Marcus mused, adjusting his virtual display. They can process crystalline structures and convert them into energy. This opens up some interesting possibilities. His sous chef, Regina Washington, was already experimenting with molecular gastronomy techniques. What if we create a dish that mimics their crystalline food but incorporates earth flavors? Like sugar crystal formations infused with fruit essences? The human approach to diplomatic relations had initially baffled the galactic community. While other species relied on formal protocols and power demonstrations, humans had somehow stumbled upon gastrodiplomacy, the art of building intergalactic relationships through shared meals. Ambassador Thela's profile suggests she has an appreciation for geometric patterns, Marcus noted, reviewing the diplomatic dossier. Regina, let's work that into the presentation. We want this meal to speak to both their biological needs and their aesthetic sensibilities. The Sylphian ship drew closer to the station, and Thela found herself increasingly intrigued by human transmissions. They had sent educational materials about Earth's culinary history, including something called fusion cuisine, the practice of combining different cultural cooking techniques. They adapt their food preparation methods based on whom they're serving, Nira reported, fascinated. It's not just about nutrition, they view meals as a form of communication. As final preparations were made on both sides, the human station's kitchen transformed into a laboratory of culinary diplomacy. Marcus and his team had created dishes that would seem familiar yet exotic to their Sylphian guests, crystalline structures that changed color with temperature, broths that shimmered with bioluminescent organisms safe for both species, and molecular gastronomy creations that mimicked the formation of stars. Remember, Marcus addressed his team, we're not just serving food. We're building bridges between worlds. Every dish tells a story about who we are and how we see them. The Sylphian delegation finally docked, their ship's crystalline structure creating rainbow patterns across the station's viewing windows. As Thela and her team prepared to disembark, they received one final transmission from the humans, a beautiful holographic invitation showing the carefully crafted menu, each dish named in both human standard and Sylphian crystal speak. Perhaps, Thela mused to her team, these humans understand something about diplomacy that we've overlooked all these years. Sometimes the simplest gestures carry the most profound meanings. As the airlock cycled and the delegation prepared to meet their hosts, none of them realized they were about to participate in what would later be known as one of the most successful first contact events in galactic history, all because humans believed that breaking bread together was the ultimate universal language. Marcus surveyed the gleaming diplomatic dining hall through the kitchen's observation window, his heart racing with equal parts excitement and anxiety. The space had been transformed into what his team called the galaxy's most ambitious fusion restaurant. Crystalline sculptures crafted by human artisans lined the walls, designed to refract light in patterns that would resonate with Sylphian sensibilities. Temperature control systems are at optimal levels, Regina reported, checking the environmental displays. We've matched the atmospheric conditions of their home world exactly. She paused, watching the molecular assemblers put finishing touches on what looked like diamonds made of flavored light. Though I still can't believe we're actually attempting to cook for beings who eat crystals. The preparation area had become a curious blend of traditional kitchen and high-tech laboratory. Quantum food synthesizers hummed alongside conventional ovens, while holographic displays showed real-time molecular structure analysis of each dish. The human team had spent months studying Sylphian biology and cultural preferences, determined to create a menu that would bridge the gap between carbon-based and crystal-based life forms. Did you see the latest readings from the flavor matrix? Dr. Javier Ortiz, their xenobiologist turned culinary consultant, called from his workstation. The crystalline growth patterns are maintaining stability while incorporating the earth spice compounds. It's revolutionary. Marcus nodded, remembering the countless failed experiments that had led to this breakthrough. They had discovered that certain earth minerals, when properly structured and infused with traditional cooking techniques, could create dishes that both species could not only consume but actually enjoy. It had taken 3 months just to figure out how to make water-based and crystal-based cuisines compatible. Chef, the Sylphian delegation is approaching the station's main airlock, announced the AI assistant, its voice calm but carrying a note of urgency. Estimated time to arrival, 30 minutes. The kitchen burst into coordinated activity. Each member of the culinary team had trained for months for this moment, practicing their movements until they flowed like a well-choreographed dance. Traditional chefs worked alongside food scientists, their different approaches melding into something entirely new. In the preparation area, Regina supervised the final assembly of what they dubbed terrestrial twilight, crystal formations that grew like flowers, each petal containing different earth flavors that would dissolve in a Sylphian's unique digestive system. The dish looked like a garden made of starlight. The molecular binding is holding steady, she reported, checking the quantum scanner. Each crystal matrix is maintaining its flavor profile without compromising structural integrity. Meanwhile, in the station's diplomatic quarter, Cultural Liaison Officer Priya Patel was putting the finishing touches on the dining hall's ambience. She had spent weeks studying Sylphian art and architecture, determining the perfect balance between human warmth and Sylphian geometric precision. Lighting adjusted to spectrum K7, she murmured, watching as the room's illumination shifted to a soft, crystalline glow that would make both species feel comfortable. Sound dampening fields active, temperature gradient optimal. The dining tables themselves were works of art, created specifically for this occasion. Made from a transparent aluminum alloy, they had been grown rather than manufactured, their molecular structure arranged to create natural crystalline patterns that would appeal to Sylphian aesthetics while maintaining human functionality. Station control to culinary team, crackled the intercom. Sylphian ship has initiated docking procedures. Ambassador Thela has transmitted their final delegation list, 12 members total. Marcus took a deep breath, checking the final preparation schedules one last time. Each course had been timed to perfection, taking into account both human and Sylphian digestive rates. They had even calculated the exact moments when certain dishes would change color or structure, creating a dining experience that would be as much performance as meal. Remember everyone, he addressed his team, we're not just serving food today. We're proving that different species, no matter how alien to each other, can find common ground. Even if that ground happens to be a dinner table. In the station's diplomatic office, Station Commander Lucia Torres reviewed the security protocols one final time. Not that she expected trouble, the Sylphians were known for their peaceful nature, but this was still first contact, and history had taught humanity to be prepared for anything. All scanning systems are operating at peak efficiency, her security chief reported. Though I'm still not sure about having the delegation's first contact be over dinner. Lucia smiled, remembering her own grandmother's words, La comida es amor, food is love. Sometimes, she replied, the best way to understand someone is to share a meal with them. Even if their idea of a meal is somewhat different from ours. As the final minutes ticked down, Marcus gave each dish one last inspection. The menu they had created was unlike anything ever attempted in human or Sylphian history. Each course was designed to tell a story about both species, to create moments of shared discovery and understanding. The airlock's warning light began to pulse, indicating that pressurization had begun. In moments, the Sylphian delegation would step into humanity's dining room, and a new chapter in interstellar relations would begin, one carefully crafted bite at a time. The moment Ambassador Thela and her delegation entered the dining hall, the carefully orchestrated atmosphere shifted into something unexpected. The Sylphians' natural bioluminescence interacted with the room's lighting in ways no simulation had predicted, creating aurora-like patterns that danced across the walls. Marcus, watching from the kitchen's observation window, realized that sometimes the most beautiful moments in diplomacy couldn't be planned. By the crystal forests, Thela breathed, her scales shifting through shades of amazement. They've created a resonance chamber. Her scientific advisor, Pell, was already analyzing the room's structure with barely concealed excitement. Station Commander Torres stepped forward, executing a perfect Sylphian greeting gesture, a complex pattern of light reflected off specialized patches on her uniform. Welcome to humanity's table, honored guests. We hope our humble attempts at fusion cuisine will bridge our different worlds. The seating arrangement had been carefully planned, each Sylphian delegate was paired with a human counterpart, their chairs designed to accommodate both species' unique physiologies. Marcus watched as Regina emerged with the first course, her movements precise and confident. We begin with what we call Earth's essence, Regina announced, her voice clear as crystal chimes. The dishes she and her team presented looked like miniature terrariums, each containing what appeared to be growing crystal formations in the shapes of Earth's major biomes. Thela studied her portion with scientific curiosity. These formations, they're growing in real time. The crystal structures were indeed slowly expanding, each layer revealing new colors and textures. A combination of Earth's mineral compositions and your own crystal growth technologies, Dr. Ortiz explained, his eyes bright with academic enthusiasm. Each layer carries different flavors representing Earth's ecosystems. We hope to share our world with you in a way that would be both comprehensible and digestible to your species. The Sylphian delegates exchanged glances before carefully sampling the dishes. The moment of truth had arrived. Marcus held his breath, watching through the kitchen window as the aliens experienced their first taste of human Sylphian fusion cuisine. Thela's scales rippled with colors that the human translation systems took a moment to interpret: pleasure, surprise, and something that roughly translated as delighted confusion. This is, we can taste your oceans, she said wonderingly. The mineral composition carries the essence of your world seas, but structured in a way our bodies can process. The human diners began sampling their portions as well. The human version of the dish contained the same flavors but processed differently for carbon-based digestive systems. For the first time in galactic history, two radically different species were literally tasting each other's worlds. The next course, Marcus announced, entering the dining room with his team, is what we call stellar harmonics. The dishes they presented seemed to hover above the plates, consisting of crystalline spheres that hummed at different frequencies as they rotated slowly in magnetic fields. These frequencies, Pell noted, antenna twitching with interest, they match the resonance patterns of our sacred crystals. The scientific advisor scales had shifted to a deep blue of intellectual excitement. We studied the harmonic patterns of your world's crystal formations, Priya explained. Each tone corresponds to a different flavor component, creating what we hope is a symphony of taste that speaks to both our cultures. As the dinner progressed, the initial diplomatic formality began to dissolve. Humans and Sylphians found themselves engaged in animated discussions about cooking techniques, comparing notes on how different species experience taste and texture. Cultural barriers seemed to melt away with each course. You know, Regina confided to one of the Sylphian scientists, we had to invent 3 new cooking techniques just to make the dessert course possible. The scientist's scales flickered with what the translators identified as laughter. Commander Torres watched as Ambassador Thela engaged in an enthusiastic conversation with Marcus about the possibility of establishing a permanent cultural exchange program focused on culinary arts. The ambassador's normally formal demeanor had relaxed considerably, her scales now displaying patterns associated with comfortable social interaction. Your species, Thela remarked, gesturing with a crystalline appendage, approaches differences not as obstacles but as opportunities for creation. You didn't simply try to accommodate our biological needs, you found a way to celebrate them. The kitchen team continued to present course after course, each one telling a story about Earth and humanity, but structured in ways that made sense to Sylphian biology and culture. It was diplomacy through molecular gastronomy, peace through shared discovery. Perhaps, Thela mused to Commander Torres as they watched humans and Sylphians alike marvel at a dessert that simultaneously crystallized and melted. This is what true first contact should be, not an exchange of power or protocols, but a sharing of what makes each of us unique. As the evening progressed, no one in the room realized they were participating in what would become a turning point in interstellar relations. Sometimes, the most profound diplomatic breakthroughs don't come from grand gestures or complex negotiations, but from the simple act of sharing a meal, even if that meal defied the conventional laws of physics. As the main courses concluded, Marcus unveiled what his team had dubbed the Memory Garden, an interactive dessert that pushed the boundaries of both human culinary science and Sylphian crystal crafting. The center of each table transformed into a miniature crystalline garden where dessert formations grew like flowers, each one programmed to respond to the diner's emotions through their bioelectric fields. These crystal structures, Regina explained, watching the Sylphians' fascinated reactions, incorporate elements from both our worlds. The patterns they form are influenced by the emotional states of those around them. As she spoke, the crystal-like formations nearest to excited delegates began to pulse with soft, harmonious colors. Dr. Ortiz couldn't contain his scientific excitement as he observed the interactions. The molecular binding properties we discovered while developing this dish could have applications far beyond cuisine. Imagine medical treatments that could work for both our species, or new materials that combine the best properties of organic and crystalline structures. Ambassador Thela's scientific advisor, Pell, was already deep in conversation with a human biochemist about potential research collaborations. Their discussion had attracted a small crowd of both species, all watching as they sketched molecular diagrams in the air using the table's holographic interface. Your approach to molecular gastronomy, Pell noted, his scales shimmering with intellectual excitement, could revolutionize how we think about matter manipulation. We've always treated organic and crystalline substances as fundamentally separate, but you've shown us they can work in harmony. Commander Torres observed the scene with quiet satisfaction. What had started as an unconventional diplomatic dinner had evolved into something far more significant. Around the room, humans and Sylphians were sharing stories, exchanging scientific theories, and even attempting to teach each other their respective forms of art. You know, Thela remarked to Torres, her scales displaying patterns of thoughtful reflection, when we first received your dinner invitation, many on my ship thought it was either a translation error or an elaborate trap. Now I understand it was something far more revolutionary, a genuine attempt to understand us at the most fundamental level. In the kitchen, Marcus and his team were already discussing future possibilities with their Sylphian counterparts. The aliens had been particularly intrigued by human fermentation processes, seeing parallels with their own crystal growing techniques. Plans were being made for culinary exchange programs and joint research projects. What if we combined your crystal growing chambers with our traditional fermentation methods? Regina suggested, sketching out a design on her tablet. We could create entirely new forms of food that would be more than just sustenance, they could be a true blend of our cultures. The evening took an unexpected turn when one of the Sylphian junior delegates, inspired by the successful fusion of their cuisines, began sharing traditional Sylphian harmony crystals, devices that created complex resonance patterns used in their cultural ceremonies. To everyone's surprise, these patterns seemed to complement the earth classical music playing softly in the background. Priya, the cultural liaison, quickly recognized the opportunity. Music and food have always been universal languages on Earth, she explained to the delighted Sylphians. Different cultures express them differently, but they always bring people together. As if to prove her point, a spontaneous demonstration of Earth dancing broke out when a human chef attempted to teach a Sylphian the basic steps of a waltz. The sight of a crystalline being trying to master human dance moves while their scales flickered with amusement brought smiles to every face in the room. Your species continues to surprise us, Thela said to Torres, watching the impromptu dance lesson. You've taken what could have been a simple diplomatic function and turned it into a genuine cultural exchange. More than that, you've shown us new possibilities we never considered. In the corner of the room, Dr. Ortiz and Pell had moved from theoretical discussions to practical experiments, using the dinner's leftover crystalline structures to test their new hypotheses. Their excitement was contagious, drawing in more scientists from both species. Look at this molecular bonding pattern, Pell exclaimed, his scales practically glowing with enthusiasm. If we apply your organic chemistry principles to our crystal growing techniques, we could develop new materials with unprecedented properties. As the evening wound down, it became clear that this dinner had accomplished far more than anyone had anticipated. What started as an experiment in culinary diplomacy had evolved into the foundation for genuine cooperation between species. Plans were already being made for joint research projects, cultural exchange programs, and regular diplomatic meetings, all centered around the sharing of food and knowledge. Marcus watched it all from his kitchen, realizing that sometimes the grandest diplomatic achievements begin with the simple desire to share a meal with someone different from yourself. Even if that someone happens to be a crystalline being from across the galaxy. 1 month after the historic dinner party, the Europa diplomatic station had transformed into the galaxy's first interspecies culinary and cultural institute. The once modest kitchen where Marcus and his team had prepared their groundbreaking meal now served as the central laboratory for a joint human-Sylphian research initiative. Regina stood at her new workstation, surrounded by a mixture of traditional cooking equipment and Sylphian crystal growing chambers. The cellular response to the modified crystal matrix is exactly as we predicted, she reported to a mixed team of human and Sylphian researchers. The organic compounds are successfully bonding with the crystalline structures. What had begun as culinary experimentation was revolutionizing multiple fields of science. Dr. Ortiz and Pell had published their first joint paper on biocrystal fusion technologies, which was already being hailed as a breakthrough in both medical science and materials engineering. It's remarkable, Pell observed, his scales shimmering with the Sylphian equivalent of pride. We spent centuries treating organic and crystalline life as fundamentally incompatible. It took humans deciding to cook us dinner to prove us wrong. Ambassador Thela's report to the Sylphian High Council had caused a sensation throughout their crystal cities. The idea that a species would approach first contact through shared cuisine rather than formal protocols had challenged centuries of diplomatic tradition. Now, other species were beginning to take notice. Commander Torres found herself hosting delegations from across the galaxy, all eager to learn about what was being called the human approach to interstellar relations. The secret, she explained to a group of curious alien diplomats, is that we never saw our differences as obstacles. We saw them as ingredients in a larger recipe. In the Institute's main hall, where the historic dinner had taken place, Marcus was teaching a class on molecular gastronomy to an eager group of students from both species. The room had been modified to accommodate various environmental needs, allowing beings of radically different biologies to work side by side. Cooking isn't just about feeding the body, he explained, demonstrating a technique that combined earth herbs with Sylphian crystal growth patterns. It's about creating connections. Every dish tells a story, carries a piece of culture, bridges a gap between worlds. The success of the human-Sylphian collaboration had far-reaching effects. Trade agreements were being negotiated, cultural exchange programs were flourishing, and joint scientific ventures were yielding discoveries that benefited both species. But perhaps most importantly, it had established a new paradigm for interstellar relations. You know what amazes me most? Priya mused during a planning session for the Institute's expansion. We didn't just find a way to feed each other, we found a way to understand each other. Every shared meal becomes a lesson in empathy. The station's research facilities had expanded to include new departments focusing on everything from xenobiology to cultural studies. Dr. Ortiz and his Sylphian colleagues had discovered that the principles they developed for food fusion could be applied to numerous other fields, from medicine to spaceship design. The applications are endless, he explained to a visiting delegation. By understanding how to make different molecular structures work together harmoniously, we're not just creating new foods, we're opening doors to technologies we never imagined possible. Back in the kitchen where it all began, Marcus and Regina were working with their Sylphian counterparts on plans for a galactic culinary festival. The event would bring together species from across known space, each sharing their own unique approach to nutrition and cuisine. Sometimes I wonder, Regina said to Marcus as they reviewed the festival plans, if our ancestors ever imagined that humanity's love of cooking would end up being one of our greatest diplomatic assets. Ambassador Thiele, now a regular visitor to the station, often reflected on how a simple dinner invitation had changed the course of interstellar relations. Humans, she remarked during a celebration marking the Institute's first anniversary, taught us that true diplomacy isn't about protocols or power. It's about being willing to share your table with strangers and transform them into friends. As the Institute continued to grow and evolve, it stood as a testament to humanity's unique approach to the stars. In a galaxy full of advanced technologies and ancient civilizations, it was the simple human desire to break bread with others, even if those others ate crystals instead of carbon, that had opened up new pathways to peace and understanding. Marcus still kept the original menu from that first dinner, now displayed in the Institute's museum alongside other artifacts from the historic evening. Below it, a simple plaque bore words that had become the Institute's unofficial motto: in the grand cookbook of the cosmos, differences are just ingredients waiting to be combined.